Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We're so glad that you decided to join us today. And with us, we have another one of those guests. So our guest today is Grace Knodt. And I love how the Lord always allows me to meet these, I call them all superstars in the kingdom of God. And so I got to meet Grace when inquiring upon someone else in her professional stance. So Grace Knodt, welcome to our program today. I am delighted that you said yes.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So as I was praying over you, Grace, and thinking about, if in the body underneath this interview, our viewers can click a link. It's called More, and they can find out your website, how to get in touch with you, and whatnot. But you function in the fullness of what I call kingdom governing authority or kingdom managerial authority. When the Lord first began to speak this to me, he actually called it kingdom acquisition because you're actually walking out your birthright, right? So as I was praying over you, I was thinking, at what point in your life, Grace, did you realize you were an image bearer of the great I am? Therefore, your life was intended to bear an image. Like you were to have a map of who you represented and to walk out. So at what point in your life, because today's program is all about you, and you get to decide, are we going to go way back? Are we going to go midway? Where do you want to land viewers in? And then we'll go from there.
Well, what I'd love to say about that is that, I had incredible parents. And so I was raised in a home. My dad was actually a pastor that became a chaplain at a trauma hospital. But there is no parents that loved two kids more than my parents. And so I think that's an incredible foundation. And I don't say that for people on here that haven't had that, because there's other ways that God can deliver that. But having that foundation at an early age from my parents, I knew the Father's love as early as I can remember. Not my father's, God's love.
Yeah.
But I also knew my own father's love. And so I just, I stay in a stance of gratitude because I've had that my whole life.
That's right. So share with viewers a little bit about, you've been in the industry, right, in promoting others, right, but also you've had your own passions, right, and so how old were you when you received your first song?
Oh, well, it's interesting because I've been fortunate. I call it I've worked in the industry of ministry
Yes, 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 yes,
for
yes.
20 years, and I've worked in over 80 countries. And I've worked with evangelists, I've worked with other people, but primarily I've worked with some of the top um, Christian worship leaders and ministries of our time. And so I felt that being surrounded by that, I did start to get songs before that, there's no
Okay,
question.
okay.
But especially when I started working for Ron Kenoly in 2004, um, being in that atmosphere intensely for years definitely brought out some songs.
Okay, so probably being stretched, right? We tend to worship when we're stretched, which is good, right? But you stayed in the game, right? You stayed in the game for 20 years. And I think there speaks volume. And when I read about you, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. This woman is a kingdom promoter, right? Promoting, I mean, and the blessings. So can you tell viewers about how in promoting other people, the blessings that have poured back on you, not just as a career, right? But emotionally, physically, relationally, the blessings that have poured back on you by lifting up others.
Well, I'll start by this.
Okay.
We're all worshipers. And, some people say, oh, you sing in other countries and that's not what I get paid for, but I'm a worshiper first and foremost. And so I loved what Ron Kenoly has always said, and that is when you are a worshiper, God can take you and make you anything he needs you to be. So if you think about that and you hear his voice, then you know what his yes is, even if it's totally different than what you're used to before, completely different. And so you might find yourself doing one thing one day, but as long as you're open, doing something completely different and out of the box the next day. And so the other thing is, I do believe that God ordains our steps. And so, and I have a friend who's a business mentor that always says everything happens for a reason. She says it all the time. But I always think Romans 8:28 whenever she says it. That you trust God and lean not on your understanding. And then that path opens up. So you as you know his voice and you follow his lead, you'll be amazed at where he actually leads you.
That's right. And Sister Sean over here, in her just plain Jane self, I call accepting the invitation. Literally, it's accepting the invitation, right? So when the Lord gave you the invitation to take viewers back on the business level, when he put the thought in your mind, Grace, you could turn this into a business, right? Take viewers back to that, because literally when we're open to God, what does it say? The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, like a water course. Who directs it? Oh, he directs it wherever he wants it to go, right? Well, it says that the earth itself is waiting for the sons and daughters to arrive. That's us, right? So we are the king, because the king of the entire universe dwells inside of us. We're the kingship in the land, right? So take viewers down that path, Grace.
Well, sure. It's funny. Everything happens for a reason, like we just said. But I was raised by wonderful, loving parents, like I mentioned, that were very pastoral, very counseling oriented, very loving. But I also was raised partly by an entrepreneurial family. And so I did some exciting work at a very young age for another family in town that were just entrepreneurs. So I learned business at a very young age as well. And I'm always thankful for that experience to this very day. And so, it's more of, I think what you mentioned earlier, when you stay open to God, then he can actually direct those paths, and he can actually, in other words, when you move forward, it's important. I have streams of income that are not in ministry. And so it's important just to be open to what the Lord has for you. And so, when I started I've always served the Lord, but I always say my professional career started with Ron Kenoly, because that was in 2004. And I always say sometimes the difference between a professional and an amateur is a professional's paid and an amateur not. And so that was, even though I had been in ministry forever, even serving in the church as I was growing up and different things, I had never been paid. And so when I actually started with Ron Kenoly, I was supposed to stay for 2 months, and that relationship lasted 20 years. And along the journey, he was averaging 35 countries a year.
Okay.
And so that instantly put me in a learning curve.
Yes.
And it put me in relationship with pastors all over the world. And so once I started working with those pastors, they would call me back and say, hey, can you get me Don Moen? Hey, can you get me Donnie McClurkin? Hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And, it was amazing. It has been amazing in this journey to gain friends from all over the world that I never would have otherwise had. One of the countries that I've done the most work in is Nigeria. The south of Nigeria is worshiping. A lot of people would never guess if I just said, hey, what country have you done the most work in? That Nigeria would be in the top 1 or 2. And so that part is amazing as well. But literally, my biggest banner is just to stay open to what God has for you. So going back to the songwriting for a minute, he put relationships in my path that were actual songwriting partners. So where my weaknesses were, I'm a good lyricist, but where some of my weaknesses were in musically, he put musical people in my world as close friends, and we just had fun writing. It wasn't, that big of a deal. But one of those people is Brazilian. So some of the songs that I've actually written have been translated into Portuguese, into Spanish, and are signed with Sony Music. Now, here's what's interesting. I own those songs, and I don't speak Portuguese, and I don't speak Spanish. And so that, to me, you just pull away from that and say, that's God. In fact, my partner learned the songs because he does sing. He is a minister. He's also a pastor. He learned the songs in Spanish. And I said, Joe, that's God because you don't even speak Spanish. I mean, we own songs in a language that neither of us speak. And they did well. And so that part's been just, amazing. But to date, I've worked in over 80 countries. And, like I said, I think that, people often ask, what's your favorite country? It's not that as much as the most wonderful people that I've met all over the world. And so I've really loved that. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And if you chose, which by the sound of it, you didn't, okay? But I hear there's a teaching word in here for listeners to hear what Grace is saying, okay? Because if Grace went in there as if she only worked for Ron Kenoly, which she does, but if she only worked for him and it was just a job, and how come I'm not advancing in this, that, and the other, right? Because globally, Ron Kenoly is known. This interview came about because a week ago, less than a week ago, on an organization called Pray Organ, who meets every single day, year-round, to intercede for an hour from 7 to 8. But it wasn't on that. It was on the SWAT team, right? Ron Kenoly's song comes up in my mind. You are love, you are love, you are light, you are Lord over everything. His song just comes blaring and all the knobs are turned up everywhere, right? And I'm just like so blessed by it, right? But I really hear you saying, so can you take your viewers back to some of those check moments where the Holy Spirit told you, don't just go here, Grace, take it a step further. And you had to make a decision, Grace.
Sure. So, I worked for him for about 7 years operationally handling his schedule.
Okay.
And that's kind of when I branched out to do other things for other people and just kind of more went into a relationship with him where I would, bring dates to the table for him. Okay. But along the way, before I separated from doing his schedule full time, there were people that were already asking me for people, and I was able to send his sons out at the time for dates that he couldn't do. And so, because when you're traveling as much as he is, he can't possibly do all the invitations that he still even gets at his age. And so I had joy in starting to help his sons and starting to help other people like Don Moen. And it literally was just, being led, after I stopped doing his schedule full time, I was connected with Reinhard Bonnke, and that was an incredible journey as well. Getting to do some special projects for him and for his ministry. And truthfully, it was just a wonderful experience to be around him before he passed. And for quite a few years. But again, that was just one thing I was doing. It wasn't, I just was on special. I remember the first time I talked to them, their CEO said, oh, well, I said, they wanted some help. And they said, you're the exact person we're looking for. And I said, yeah, but I can't do anything full time because I've got too many things going on. And they said, oh, well, we don't do that. Everything has to be done, the other way. And I said, okay, well, that's just where I'm at. I can't do that. And they came back to me and said, okay, we can do it your way. In other words, we'll figure this out. And that at that moment, and that was great. And I got to help that ministry with a lot of special projects over time and, meet some wonderful people. But, Reinhard as a young boy had a vision to cover Africa. And he ended up covering the whole entire globe, literally. But that vision, I've never met a human being that was more focused than him. He just had one vision and stuck to it and had an incredible journey, and at the time, I really felt like he was one person that had spoken publicly to more people than any other human being on earth, because he literally had millions coming to his crusades in Africa in the 2000s, and unbelievable. So I feel like I've been able to observe a lot, be around a lot, learn a lot. I love the term imprinting. Sometimes as far as learning, because sometimes we learn, from somebody else's experience.
That's right.
But one of the best experiences is experiential learning.
Experiential. I had to think of how experiential, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Experiential learning, how to learn that way. And so a lot of my journey has been through experiential learning. And, there's other people. I've been less formal. I have relationships with the people that I've helped, but I've been less formal about it. But there's a couple other people that have done some of the networking that I've done, and we're good friends. We've got, we help each other and that kind of thing. But stay open to the Lord. In, in 2015, I was able to co-host an event at the United Nations, and that just came from, just being in circles, and have a friend of mine started that project, but I knew it was too big for him to finish at that moment, just with what he was going through. And so, I jumped in and we partnered and had an incredible event. But again, making yourself available is, to whatever it is, just being available. And I'll have to add, with joy.
Yes.
One thing, complaining is not going to get you anywhere. And, I would love to teach on gratitude and non-complaining, because you do hear a lot of people complaining. None of us are perfect. We all have moments. But there are people that live in it. Yeah. And, my tip for that is to be solution oriented.
That's right.
What do you need? Ask the Lord, and sometimes he provides what we need, not what we want in that moment. But to seek out solutions. Take your time and your energy and seek out solutions.
That's really good. And one thing you did that I just value so much is that you actually stayed in your lane, right? So when the Reinhard Bonnke crew contacted you, right? And they were like, no, you could have abandoned ship and left all of these other people that you were, that you had connections with, that you were helping them to have connections with, right? Talk about multi-level marketing, right? You're a marketer for the kingdom of God, right? And so, you could have abandoned ship out of fear, right? Out of fear, you could have said, oh my gosh, I got to do this. But you chose to say, no, you honored all of these other people. And because you honored all these other people, the Lord says, the Lord showed me this phrase in 2019. He called it one in both. One in both. I will, while you're doing this, I will also, or both, one in both, I will also promote you. Right? And so with to talk about your songs that have been written in Portugal, right? This is huge. And not only that, but in order to do what you have done, you've also had to have an extreme gift of excellency in administration, because you can't flimsy flopsy navigate these professional people globally unless you decided to hone in on your professional gifts in admin. Right?
Well,
so go ahead.
I'd like to address that for a minute, because I'm very sanguine and I'm very creative.
Okay.
I'm a people person.
Okay.
But remember, let's go back to that entrepreneurial company that I worked for as a child and when I was younger.
Okay.
The one thing I learned there was discipline.
Okay.
And I learned how to follow up, account for every detail, and do things correctly. So I say that, and the thing is, I'm not naturally, I don't believe administrative. People try to put that on me.
Okay.
But what I am is disciplined.
That's right.
And I say that for a fact because we all have areas in our lives where we can be disciplined to go further along with that skill or what we're trying to achieve. And I say that because you might have somebody out there that doesn't feel like they're administrative, or that you can follow every detail. I mean, you can stop and do that. And, that doesn't mean you might not have a helper. I mean, one way that I've done it truthfully is I've streamlined what I do.
That's right.
And so I don't have a lot of extra involved in it. I'm very simple. I'm very, what's the word? But I'm very streamlined.
Yes,
And
yes.
so, but over time, because of the experiential learning, I've learned what's important and what's not important.
That's
And
right.
so that does help you streamline because, a lot of times in the beginning when we're learning something, the learning curve is huge. But then as we get to understand it, we have a little experience. We say, oh, okay, well, that's not so important, but this is like critical. When
That's
you
right.
learn that, it's a little bit easier to move through. And then also, I love the concept of teams. I have one of my friends is a former NFL player.
Okay.
And everything in his language is about the team. Because he was a real one. I mean, he played for 10 years for the Bears and the Cold and, but I love being around him because his mind automatically thinks team. And I just think that's fabulous, and, that's a great example because he's retired and he's in the Charlotte area and he's working in arenas that are in the kingdom area of sports, where he's working with a lot of athletes and some pastors that are doing things with younger athletes. And that's one of the things he's got his hand to now. And so I love that.
Yeah, that's really good. And I like that because I remember when I first started, Sister Sean is creative. The only craft project I've ever done, the second craft project I've ever done, is that drawing that went out on that agreement. That's my second craft project I ever done. So when I first started, my emails were as colorful as that craft project. And one of my sons said to me, Mom, you need to make your email look more professional because you're going to not be able to reach certain people. So I streamlined and I asked somebody who has worked in similar fields as you to keep them anonymous. And I said, brother, could you please give me a professional intro to the two people? Right. And so the regular typing is Sister Sean just, being excited and creative. But the formal docs that are sent out, that came at the hand of somebody else that I paid for because I just like the people. Right. I just want to have the relationship with the people. I want to pour into the people. I want to love on the people. I want to pull out their gifts, talents, and abilities and just pour love over them so that they can move broader, higher, faster, whatever it may look like, whatever the lingo is, right? But that their story would also encourage someone else to step out, okay? So what would you say, Grace, was one of the hardest things, whether it be physically, socially, broader socially, relationally, geographically, what was your hardest thing that you just had to keep yielding yourself to the Lord? Oh my God, Lord, grow this in me, right? And obviously it's to the level of which you choose to share.
Yeah, I'm actually an eternal optimist.
Okay.
I'm an encourager. I'm one of the most positive people I know. And I don't say that, I take, my one girlfriend says I eat problems for breakfast. I mean, it's not so much that I feel like I've had a great life, and I just feel like I've been obedient and walked that path. And, I can't say that there hasn't ever been anything hard, but it's not my focus. My focus is the joy, and my focus is I think when you're realistic and you understand what you're doing and why, and you understand you have purpose, then I just count it all joy. I mean, I am constantly in a place of encouragement myself. Like, I'm just excited, and so keeping that, again, that goes back to gratitude, because when you stand in a grateful place, I think a lot of people can go, there's so many reasons to be, oh, woe's me, oh, I've just never been like that. I've just been more in a place like, wow, I've had an incredible life. I'm just super thankful. And just looking for the next opportunity that is there.
Right. That's good, because that means you're a distributor of hope, joy, peace. You're a distributor. That's amazing, because you can choose. You can choose, because it doesn't, okay, for those who didn't grow up in such an environment, that would be Sister Sean, right? I didn't grow up in that environment. But once my eyes began to read the eternal, infallible Word of God, and I knew what I had birthright access to, I'm like, oh no, I'm choosing that right there. That's what I'm choosing right there. And so if we think of music, right, and your music jumping into other countries, they grew because the heart of the heart of where the lyrics came from were that of what sort of things are pure, what sort of things are true, what sort of things are lovely, what sort of things are honest, what sort of things are just, right? They came from your heart. So it's your heart, whether it be just your song solo or somebody else, right, that carried even the relationships that you have built with people, right? It's carried because your heart goes into whatever you do, okay? So what would because I almost think it's silly if you look at December the 31st and then January the 1st, and all of a sudden we're supposed to be in this complete new mindset, right? Because I'm sorry, God's outside of time, right? That's just Sister Sean's thinking. God is outside of time. So if you just think of time, or as a season, right? Where we're at right now, what is the strongest thing you want to pass on to viewers? We already spoke of joy, so we know that, and gratitude, right? And what's the strongest value you want to pass on to them? It looks like a football. You want to pass on to them that grab a hold of this, and it's going to change your world. We know it's about Jesus because the program is about Jesus, right? So what would you share with the viewers, Grace?
Well, gratitude is one thing. I would say that this is unusual, but it's what's coming up. When I was much younger, probably in my early 20s, I actually stole a tape series from my nail lady on the spirit of offense. And it was by Joyce Meyer. And I just wanted to say that because at that moment in time, I had this good life. I'd never really heard the word offense or thought about it for sure. And this tape series had 4 tapes in it. And the first thought I had, I was in a word church. I was really excited about, things of God. And the first thought I had is, there's no way that there's 4 tapes on offense. Like, what can they be saying about offense for 4 tapes? I mean, I literally thought that. And it was such a great series. I have it somewhere to this day, and I confessed to my nail lady that she knew that I stole it, whatever. But it was true. I just never gave it back. But what was so powerful about it is it talked about, from my memory, that offense. You don't want to be offended with other people. You don't want them offended with you to the best of your ability. You don't want to be offended at God. And, it just really elaborated. And I think it's truly, I think John Bevere wrote a book called Offense, the Bait of Satan. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in conversations with people, you notice that they have been offended, or I call it like baggage. I have written some unpublished children's books, and you carry it around, or you wear it like a garment, and that garment could be unforgiveness, or that garment could be, and you know what? You could take that garment off, You don't own that garment, and you could put on the garment of love or the garment of healing or the garment of joy. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that if they're in a place and they're sad or they're depressed or they're bitter, God has something better for them.
That's right.
And, they can learn about that and what it is and learn to take off some of the things that destroy our lives.
That's right.
And put something else on. And it's okay to have those feelings or to own them or to go through experiences, but then don't stay there.
That's right.
Because some people stay there and they're literally stuck. And so that would be my encouragement is if you're in a place where you don't want to be, get some good counseling or get some good help, whether it's from a friend or a pastor or your local church, and find out how you can improve your life just by changing you.
That's really good because, I've learned as time has progressed on that the only thing in the world that I have absolute control over is what I choose to think on. Nothing else. And so I love what you're saying that because whether it be emotionally or physically, how somebody carries themselves, facially, how they carry themselves, it's going to show to the person you're talking to. And I even like how you said that in the midst of talking to someone, I could tell they'll pick up a fence, right? So to me, that also signifies that you're a teacher, right? You have not only are you an encourager, but you're a teacher, right? Because that's what enabled you to be able to observe that in someone else, right?
Well, and not necessarily that they pick it up, but they're already carrying it from something.
Got you.
Yeah. And so not necessarily from me, but I can see them carrying this weight, and that weight doesn't belong to them.
Yes, that's right.
And so how to let go of that and really move forward.
That's really good. That's so good.
And I think the other thing, a really good friend of mine, Martine, who has an incredible magazine called Avail, and also he's just done some incredible things in the body of Christ. He wrote a book called Unboxed. And, I think a lot of times, sometimes people have been taught things to no fault of their own, but they might live in a box and they might think that more is not possible. Even if they've been in a career for a while or, they've had influences that said, you need to do it this way. That there's other things available if they would step out of the box or just put their toe out of the box and test them out. So I think I would say, don't be afraid to try something new, step out of the box, follow your heart. You don't have to be stuck.
That's right. Where do I want to go with this, Lord? This is just so great. I love your wisdom, insight. Okay, let me look at my note that I had right here. Oh, okay. So this is one thing that I jotted down when I was praying over you is Betty Jean Roberts. Okay, your parents would have known of her, Betty Jean Roberts. She wrote more songs than anybody else of her day and only sang a few of them. So she wrote songs for tons of people, but she only sang a few of them, right? Well, what if she decided to not function in her gifts, right? So can you give us, you would know who you would have permission to do so, okay? Of the people around the globe that you worked alongside of or with, what is somebody that maybe they were just starting out in their ministry or their aspirations or whatever, right? And then as they began to engage with you, and maybe potentially you were able to connect them with other people or whatever, but you got to see them flourish, and in your heart, not like, gosh, I got to have a visual, not like I had a part to do with that, but yet you knew that you did. And it blessed you, but it blessed you to see them grow. So can you talk about that?
Sure. And I think that's what's so important with mentorship, because, if your heart's leaning in a direction, find somebody that's gone before you and find out, learn from their wisdom so you're not totally reinventing the wheel. I can speak to this early on when I was working for Dr. Kenoly. I was overseeing his Academy of Praise, which is his mentoring school, his teaching school. And there would be pastors and worship leaders and different people from all over the country, all over the world, truthfully, that would come. And, because he's one person, a lot of times people would end up coming to me for questions instead of him after it was over or on the years following, and continuing that relationship. And I would just say that over time, there's been quite a few other people around Dr. Kenoly, and not just him, even other areas of ministry, who I've watched grow in their careers. And I've done that with great joy and have helped where I can. It's people that have been faithful to what they're supposed to be doing. And, anything, but it does really give me joy. His own son, Sam Kenoly, is worship leading for a church of 17,000 now in North Carolina. It's a satellite church. And so I've walked with his sons for a long way, and Sam is doing, I'm just super proud of him. He's been through his own journey and is doing great. And in the process, raising 4 kids and, enjoying life. But, and that's just one example. But, I've got a couple other friends that have been, have gotten Dove Awards or Grammys or, those kinds of things. And it's just great to be able to celebrate with them. It's kind of like you're in a community and you grow together, and the community is large. It's not small, and some people might have a minor role in your connecting with you, but then you're able to help them with something on down the road. It's exciting to see that, come. But that's a good question.
Yeah, that's really good. And, I was thinking of, like you said, the Carolinas, and I'm like, is that elevation? Because you said they had satellite churches, right? And is it?
It's not.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's not, but I can tell you one fast surprise is that I've been surprised at how many churches do have
satellites.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So it's actually out of Raleigh instead of Charlotte.
Okay.
And yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. So Raleigh, oh my gosh, I think it was like in 2012, 11, 12-ish, we were having a prayer meeting. And my husband and I went, because that was right about the time when all of our kids were going to be down to one kid, to graduate, and they were going to plant a church in Raleigh. So I prayed for Raleigh back in 2012.
Awesome.
And I didn't really know anything about the Carolinas, and later one of my sons would wind up moving to the Carolinas, right?
Yeah.
And so now, what about? Have you always lived in the same state you live in now, or have you moved over the years?
No, I was born and raised in Ohio. I'm a Buckeye inside and out, and moved to Florida 22 years ago, and live in Orlando. Love it. It's a great place to base, and, have just connected with really, really amazing people here. And so, Florida is a great place to live.
Have you got to meet the McNamara's? Scott and Jay McNamara's with Jesus at the Door?
Mm-mm.
Not yet. Oh, you'll just love them. Oh, I'm going to have to introduce you to Jay. So was there anything else on your heart that you want to release to the public? Anything else that you're just, oh man, I should have shared that?
Well, I just, again, it's been interesting because during the pandemic, I opened up several other business streams just because, the world kind of shut down and, people stopped traveling as much. But, what I would say is just as an encouragement again to just know that always remember that anything is possible. God is God. Some people say, oh, I just want to encourage people that whether they're young, they could be young, but follow your heart and follow what God has for you. And you'll be surprised to where he takes you in that journey. Life's a great journey. And I want to say one other thing. Okay. Enjoy the journey. Learn how to enjoy the journey, because I'm going to leave this person nameless, But I had a minister that I really loved for a while. Followed his ministry. His ministry ministered to me. Just thought he was doing some really great things. And he's older. And I heard him say one time, I don't know, it was probably in the last 5 years, that he just had a revelation that he ought to be enjoying the journey. And I was like, are you telling me that you've come this far not enjoying the journey? That's horrible. It's like,
Yeah.
enjoy the journey of life. And,
Right.
you know, if you, like God said, Dr. Kenoly wrote a song, "If you can use anything, you can use me." I think he wrote it with DeWitt Jones, just to give appropriate credit, years and years ago. And it got really big. It was a really big song. And I was a part of Sam Hinn's church here, and William McDowell was our worship leader. He was also a friend because he also was younger, traveling with Dr. Kenoly when I first met him and got to see him grow. And now he's pastoring in the city. But William ended up with Sam Hinn writing "I Give Myself Away," which was just a complete, to me, it was a parallel song to "If You Can Use Anything, You Can Use Me." But just, again, being available to the Lord for whatever he wants. Some of the biggest givers are not inside the church. I mean, imagine. Some of the biggest givers I know are just people that love to give.
Oh,
And be open to people. Stay out of a box.
that's right. Now, you could have picked any song, you could have picked anything you wanted in that last bit. Anything, right? So, two parts. One, I love that you called it "Following Your Business Dream," right? Because those gifts, talents, and abilities were placed inside of you. And so if you don't walk them out, you're robbing the world of what's been placed inside of you, right? Well, you use the "if you could use anything, Lord, you can use me," right? I met my now husband through that song. I was at work one day and I sang it in my mind for 5 hours straight. I got in the car and I wound up contacting an intercessor, and I said, "Hey sis, is there anything going on?" 5 times. You know how you go back and revisit a conversation? 5 times I asked her, "Was there anything going on?" Finally, she said, "Oh my gosh, there is." And she tells me about a widower, right? Who had just lost his wife the Saturday before Christmas. And so she goes, then she said these words. She goes, and so, our pastors asked me to arrange meals for the family. And she goes, "Of course, if there's anything anybody else wanted to do, I'm sure it would bless the family." Well, when she said that, the thought that was placed in my mind was, I wonder if the family could use cleaning ministered to them. Well, my response to that thought was, I am not going in the home of a man. And you know why? Because of what I shared. I am not going in the home of a man to minister. I said it twice. I told the Lord twice that, right? But then out of my mouth came, "Tanya, do you think the family could use cleaning ministered to them?" And she was like, "Oh, Sean, I was praying if it was the Lord's will, he would speak to you," right? That's how I met my husband. And I was blessed with 2 more children and being open. But there was a woman who had a Bible study, Grace, and it was Cynthia Held. And her book was called, I want to say, Becoming a Woman of Freedom. And after I'd shared this with my friend, I called this man up, who's now my husband, sang the song to him. "If you could use anything, Lord, you could use me." Right? But should that not be our heart posture? "Lord, send me." Or, "Lord,
Yeah.
I'll sign up." Or, "Lord, I'll do this." Not to commit yourself, right? Because when you'll know if you're not in your lane, right? And then if you are in your lane, like you said, I want to go back to something you said. You said, maybe my gifts, talents, and abilities weren't as strong in this area, but I've learned to work alongside of other people. And you gave mention to co-writing, right? And how you've seen the benefits, instead of saying, "Well, I can't figure that all out on my own. And so, I guess I'm just not created to be a songwriter." Right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
huge, huge.
Well, and one thing that came to me before I ever started working in the ministry, the industry of ministry, was one time I was with a group of people and we were just supposed to go around the table and say something. And so what I said was that I really prayed that I would be where God wants me at all times. And you wouldn't believe how much that has really been a profound statement for ever since I said it, because a lot of times there might be two good choices, you know, but kind of like you said with that situation with cleaning that house, you know, if you're supposed to be there, then just let me know. But going back to this statement is sometimes there are two good choices. And I've been in those situations where I've had the opportunity to go, you know, one place or another, and they're both exciting. Which one do I do? And so I just usually have to, you know, ask for a door to close or for one of those, you know, something, show me where am I supposed to be. But it's not that, but I just always understand. And I think what that does is allow us to be present so that, you know, when we're with people, I think it's really important that we're present with them. And so, in other words, if I feel like, oh no, I'm supposed to be in France this week instead of in Miami or whatever it is, then, you know, you're all of a sudden you're thinking about that instead of the person in front of you that you could be blessing or that you could receive something from. And so, you know, I just trust that I am where I'm supposed to be and that there's a purpose for me being there, whether it is to give or to receive or whatever's going on. And just to be sensitive to that, but just to start with, you know, not feeling like, oh, you know, I'm supposed to be somewhere else or I'm supposed to be doing something else. Just be present and do the best where you are and allow that to be your launching pad for where you're supposed to go.
That's good. You know, and also, Grace, you couldn't have attained the level of success or been involved in promoting so many others globally or been given the honor to co-host, you know, where you did or being asked to speak where you have. You couldn't have done that if you compared yourself to another, right? It was just, you know, so because I think for people, body image, mental body image, I think is so vitally important, right? And so what would you speak to someone on that topic alone?
With body image?
Yes, the importance that each carries.
Well, I think that there's, you know, there's a lot of great things out there that even change people's body images today that makes me laugh. But, you know, the number one thing is, I think let's start somewhere else. You have to go back to self-love.
Okay.
And I actually can speak on this topic because I feel like I'm very health minded, very natural ingredient minded, very I can go on down that rabbit trail for a while, but we're not going to go there today. But as far as people trying to compare themselves to what they think is happening in Hollywood or what they think is happening in New York Fashion Week or what, you know, whatever the moment is, you have to start from the place of, I love myself just the way God made me. I am a miracle. I am made in his image. And there was a person, again, I love to leave people nameless, that, you know, I see women more than men carrying around all the time, oh, I've got to lose 5 pounds or I got to lose. Now, if that is something you're led to do, it's fine.
Yeah.
But there's something on our society that's not healthy that says you're supposed to look exactly like this. And if you don't, you're not beautiful or you're not you know, and this person said to me, you look great just the way you are. And that was around 2008 or 9. And I'm telling you, when they said it, I always carried that, you know, oh, I need to lose, you know, but when they said it, it was like something broke off of me to where ever since then, I have just had self-love and freedom for exactly the way God made me. And to me, that's exciting, you know, because I feel like there's so much pressure that is not from God to look like somebody else or And again, it's not that there are things we can do to enhance how we look, or, you know, and I'm not at all saying those are bad, but if I had a pastor in Columbus who's wonderful, and he always says, look at the root behind something. If that root is, you know, in that case is not self-love, if it's, you know, comparison or some of those other things that come, get rid of it, you know. Start with self-love, and then just go from there.
That's
So
right. And
I
self-love
think
is looking in the mirror and being okay with you. It really
understand
is.
that you're beautiful.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I love that you said that. I was somebody who avidly worked out. My mom was very obese, and I worked out religiously from the age of 16 until probably about the age of 45. I have a home gym, professional gym in my home, and I could have gone on to the Olympics. That's how strong I was, right? But mentally, the image that I was trying to be and achieve, I never could achieve it. And I had to literally drop the weights to mentally repair my brain. And now it's fully repaired, and I have never felt more beautiful in my entire life than I have in the last 9-10 years of my life. And yet the gym, the weights aren't being lifted, right? And that's why I said mental. The mental image is so important. And so thank you for that, Grace. I really appreciate your insight, Grace. And not Grace Cannot, because that's how you say her name, but Grace Cannot says you can. That could be the title of a book. Says you can. Yes, you can. So I just bless you, sis, and I just thank you for your time. I thank you for what you're doing around the world, and I continue to look forward to when your name's going to pop up in people that I know.
Well,
So,
thank you for having me today, and you're a fabulous host, and I'm really glad to meet you.
yeah, ditto. Okay, you have a great day, and I want to say thank you to all of our guests for coming on today. And until our future broadcast and our next guest, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon thee always. Blessings. Bye.